Hey trainers, Professor Seedbed here. Booze, hooch, cold ones, no matter what you call it, almost every culture has some form of alcoholic beverage. And many traditions involving alcohol stem from some kind of religious belief or story. In this video, I wanted to go over where religion and alcohol intersect. I wanted to go over different religious views and traditions involving alcohol, including but not limited to drinking games, traditions, and restrictions. So let's crack open a cold one of knowledge in this episode of Religion IRL. Starting off with the ancient Greeks, we have the game Katabas, which was a Greek drinking game used primarily in the 5th and 6th centuries in such areas as Athens. Awareness of this game has been gaining some popularity online, so I wouldn't blame you if you've already heard of this one, but I still want to go over it. So what Athenian youths would do is that they would recline all around a large pole, and there would be a small coin-like saucer placed on top of the pole called a plastinx, and also down the pole were other rings called mains. And the goal of the game was to take wine that was in a saucer-like cup and fling it at the coin, hoping that it falls over and hits one of the mains, making a bell-like ding. And you go around the circle until somebody had done that, and the winner would get a prize like a sweet or a kiss. Many famous philosophers, writers, and other scholars were known to either play this game or implement imagery of the game in their writings. And Katabas was also said to be a sacred test of valor, with many of the cups being decorated with different gods or satyrs or youth that were being celebrated or were just good at the game. Although I should say that often women were portrayed on the cups, usually as a joke to say that those women were less than proper. Maybe making fun of, say, Spartan women. Let's continue with the Jewish tradition of Purim. Now, Purim is a holiday and festival that celebrates the story of Esther as found in the Hebrew Bible and Old Testament. It's celebrated like many other festivals with costumes and food and parades and often lots of drinking. During the celebration of Purim, the story of Esther is read at temples, and often there are callbacks, or you can boo or cheer at certain parts, or even they've implemented themes. And it's very similar to if you've ever seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Now, what people will often do is drink at specific parts of Purim, like during the part where they say, "Blessed is Mordecai," and "Cursed be Haman." And sometimes folks will drink until they can't tell the difference between those two callbacks. Now, of course, as to be expected, there are mixed opinions on these activities involving alcohol, with multiple rabbis and scholars calling it inappropriate to use a biblical holiday as an excuse to get shwasted. But nevertheless, it happens. And let's be honest, what's one of the best ways to get young people to drink? Tell them not to do it. That's the same in every culture. I should also mention, during this section on Judaism, the Passover celebration, in which 4 cups of wine are drank to celebrate the 4 promises made by God to the Jewish people during the Exodus story, saying that God would take them out of Egypt, save them, redeem them, and make of them a nation. Also, many times, some of the wine is dedicated to the innocent Egyptians that had to die for the Jewish people to be freed. That was an interesting tidbit that I wanted to bring up because I thought it was rather sympathetic and empathetic. Moving on to Nordic tradition, much of Norse mythology is based around celebrating, eating, and drinking, along with, of course, warfare. They believe that the best place that a warrior could go when they die would be Valhalla, the feast hall of the gods, where there's lots of food and a lot of drink. So it's no surprise that there would be ample traditions involving drinking alcohol in Norse tradition. In fact, one of the games that they would play in the 5th and 6th century is called flighting, During this game, the party would be split up into pairs of two, one male and one female. And after taking a big swig of mead, they would insult one another almost like a rap battle or poetry slam. Next, another practice that we find is a part of neo-pagan tradition and is found in such literary works as Beowulf. This is called the cymbal or the toasting gauntlet. This consists of many rounds of drinking, and it would start off with somebody holding the giant toasting gauntlet, and that first person would make a toast to a god or a warrior or a king and then drink from it, and it would go around the circle with everyone doing that. And in the second round, the person would say something that they did that year, and they would take a drink. And the third go around, they would share something that they were going to do. They would take an oath for the next year, and they would take a drink. My assumption is at the beginning, the toasts were very poetic and fully comprehensible, and by the end, not so much. Moving on from our friends in and around Scandinavia, let's move to Germany. Continuing with our neo-pagan tradition, we have the wager cups, which were used as a wedding tradition in the 16th century in Germany. The tradition is that you would fill both cups with an alcoholic beverage, and the bottom one would swing, and you would try to drink from the lower swinging cup without spilling from the top cup. Now, I couldn't find a specific religious story or tradition connected to this, but wedding ceremonies were and still are religious ceremonies, so I figured that would be good to include on the list. Since we're on the topic of sacred cups, I reckon the Kapala should be next. This is used by some Hindu and Tibetan Buddhist sects, and is a kind of ritualistic instrument used for offerings for harsh deities. It is or is in the shape of a human skull, and often blood or parts of a human sacrifice were placed in that to appease some wrathful deities like Shiva, Kali, Durga, etc. Now, more often, especially with the Tibetan Buddhists, what they'll do instead is that they will replace the blood with wine and the body parts for cake that's shaped like body parts like ears or a nose, so on and so forth. I can tell you that if I was a wrathful deity, that's certainly what I would prefer. Similar to Hindu and Buddhist traditions involving the Kapala, many Native American tribes, as well as Shinto religion, will often devote wine or other alcoholic beverages to a god, a deity, or an ancestor. I think of traditions like the Dia de los Muertos, in which a family member's favorite food and drink are placed on a table as an offering to them. Or the Incans and their ancestors would devote similar things like cigars, food, and drink to Pachamama, the Mother of Earth. When it comes to Christianity, there are several things I could talk about. While there are, of course, several restrictions against drunkenness in the Bible, Jesus also drank wine with friends, and his first miracle was turning water into wine for a wedding party. Not only that, but something that Christians recreate all the time is communion, the time when Jesus drank wine and ate bread with his friends right before he died. Nevertheless, something that I certainly wanted to talk about were Gregorian monks and their breweries, as monasteries were the first breweries. These monks would often farm or write as scribes or brew beer in order to make a living to support themselves and the monasteries. So beer often became an integral part in the life and lifestyles of these monks, and they would often fast only using beer. This is because, of course, beer has enough calories to get one by during the day if you drink enough of it, but it won't exactly be a pleasant experience after a while. They would sometimes fast only drinking beer for 40 days, like the Palmer monks in Bavaria. In the 17th century, during the Lenten season, that's all they would drink, and they wouldn't eat anything also. Now, I will say that there are some modern accounts of folks trying to recreate this fast, and the individuals usually don't have great results. Lastly, it would be amiss of me to not include some alcohol restrictions in some religions as well. Judaism and Christianity often talk about the dangers of drunkenness and overindulging in alcohol, but don't outright ban it often. However, many sects of Mormonism, Hinduism, and Islam do. First, let's talk about Mormonism. In 1833, Mormons believed that Joseph Smith received divine revelation from God regarding dietary restrictions. This occurred after Joseph Smith and his friends would drink, smoke, and talk about theology with one another, and his wife Emma didn't approve of it. Now, if you were skeptical, you could say that one had to do with the other, but I'm sure a majority of Mormons really believe that it was divine revelation that led to them not being able to drink coffee or tea or smoke. Next, the Quran just straight up bans intoxicants like drugs and alcohol. In the Quran, it is right up there with gambling and idolatry as some of the worst things you could possibly do, and are works of Satan. Now, although this is pretty straightforward, I'm sure that all of these things were also responding to the pre-Islamic religion seen in the Middle East. These Arabic polytheistic traditions would often implement alcohol as a part of their practices. And while this restriction seems pretty straightforward to me, if you have any questions about it, I would check out 441 and 593 of the Quran. Finally, and perhaps the most varied religion, is Hinduism. Now, while there is no specific body which places regulations on what Hindus can and can't eat or drink, the general consensus is that they shouldn't partake because it takes them away from their nature, and it takes away some of their own self-control. Although, as seen before, there are some minority sects that believe that you can sacrifice alcohol to these wrathful deities. So it's going to require a lot of nuance because of how complex and varied their traditions really are. But with all that being said, like fire, water, or crystals, alcohol is just something that almost every culture has interacted with in a meaningful way. And when a culture interacts with something long enough, it becomes a part of a religion. Whether that means a restriction against drinking it, or traditions that encourage it, or somewhere in the middle. But whether your tradition has drinking games or condemns alcohol entirely, we can all raise our glasses to understanding one another and tolerance of each other's religion. Have a great day. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see more. Comment down below what else you want to see. Have a great one. Bye. Thanks so much again for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like. And if you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe. If either of these videos here strike your fancy, go ahead and click on them. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Goodbye!